You know that person who still uses the same phone they bought 6, maybe 7 years ago. The battery barely lasts until lunch. There's never enough storage. The charger only connects if you hold it at that one weird angle you've learned by muscle memory. There's a spiderweb crack in the corner of the screen that you genuinely forgot was there. And every single time someone new sees it, they ask the exact same question, with the exact same face. Wait, you're still using that thing? Here's what's strange. Most of these people aren't broke. They're not anti-technology. They could walk into a store today and walk out with the newest model in 20 minutes. But they don't. And the more you look into why, the more you realize it has almost nothing to do with money. People who refuse to upgrade have quietly figured out something the rest of us keep paying to unlearn. So let's look at what everybody else sees first, because that's where this story actually starts. Twice a year, like clockwork, a company puts on a show. Bright stage, dramatic music, a countdown clock, a device lifted into the light like it just solved a problem nobody had. Reviewers film themselves opening the box. Comparison charts flood every feed. And within about 72 hours, the phone in your pocket, the one that was doing everything you needed it to do last week, quietly becomes something to be a little embarrassed about. Nothing about your phone changed. It still calls. It still opens the apps. It still takes the photo. What changed is the story being told around it. That gap between still works fine and suddenly feels old is the very first thing the non-upgraders notice, long before anyone else does. They clock the sleight of hand. The device didn't get worse. The marketing got louder. And once you see that trick, you can't really unsee it. There's actually a name for this, and it's over 100 years old. Back in 1899, the economist Thorstein Veblen wrote about a pattern he saw in wealthy society: buying things not because you need them, but because owning them announces something about you to everyone watching. He called it conspicuous consumption. Swap out the pocket watches and carriages of Veblen's era for smartphones, and you're looking at the exact same instinct, just running through fiber optic cable instead of a drawing room. The upgrade cycle isn't really selling you a better camera. It's selling you a seat at the table. People who keep the old phone are the ones who looked at that seat and asked, quietly, "Do I actually need this table?" Now here's where it gets more interesting, because there's real psychology sitting underneath this, and it isn't about being frugal. A researcher named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi spent years studying something most of us never think to study: the actual relationship between people and their everyday belongings. What he found was that this connection isn't sentimental fluff. It's structural. Objects we live with for years become quiet extensions of who we are, storage units for memory and identity that we don't consciously notice until we lose them. Your phone isn't just a slab of glass and metal. It's the thing that was in your hand at the hospital, at the airport, during the call you'll never forget. Swapping it out isn't just a hardware decision. It's cutting a thread, and most people don't feel the cut until well after the fact. People who keep their old phones seem to sense this thread before anyone explains it to them. There's a broader pattern here too. People who tend to hold on to things, who repair rather than replace, who wear an object in rather than trade it out, score noticeably higher on something researchers refer to as object constancy, essentially, a preference for something proven over something merely new. And this trait doesn't stay contained to a junk drawer full of old chargers. It shows up everywhere in how a person moves through life. The friend who's had the same 3 close friendships for 2 decades. The person who stays in the room during the hard conversation instead of walking out. The one who keeps showing up on the unremarkable, forgettable days, not just the good ones. That's not stubbornness. That's a nervous system that wants evidence before it hands out trust, and once trust is earned, it doesn't get revoked over a shinier alternative. Your beat-up old phone, in a strange way, is a small piece of evidence about your character. If you've ever stood next to someone flashing their brand new phone and felt something that wasn't quite jealousy, wasn't quite pride either, just a quiet awareness that the two of you are simply measuring life by different rulers, you already understand exactly what's being described here. Think about the other places the same pattern shows up, because phones aren't actually the point, they're just the clearest example. The mechanic who keeps driving a truck with 200,000 miles on it because he trusts every rattle and knows exactly what each one means. The cook who refuses to replace a warped, decades-old cast iron pan because it holds heat in a way no fresh one ever will. The person who still wears their grandfather's watch, not because it tells better time than a smartwatch, but because it has already proven, decade after decade, that it won't let them down. None of these people are behind. They're operating on a completely different measurement of value, one built on track record instead of release date. A brand new object has to be taken on faith. A worn-in one has already been tested against real life and past. Now let's talk about the part almost nobody brings up when they're pushing you toward the upgrade button. A new phone typically runs somewhere between $600 and $1,200. Do that every couple of years, which is roughly the industry average, and over a decade you're somewhere between $3,000 and $6,000 spent replacing devices that, in most cases, were still working perfectly fine. And that's just the money. The United Nations has flagged electronic waste as the fastest growing waste category on the entire planet, north of 50 million metric tons a year, and the overwhelming majority of it isn't broken junk. It's devices retired early because they started to feel outdated, not because they stopped functioning. The people who keep their old phones didn't set out to save the planet or their bank account. That was never really the plan. They just trusted a simple, almost boring instinct. If it still works, it's not actually broken, no matter how loudly the culture insists otherwise. That instinct turns out to be backed by the data. They just got there years before the data caught up. And if you zoom out far enough, this whole habit stops looking new at all. Long before quarterly earnings calls and planned obsolescence became business strategy, people repaired their boots instead of tossing them. They sharpened the same knife for 30 years. They handed a reliable tool down to their kid instead of replacing it with something flashier. Not because better options didn't exist, but because something that had proven itself over time had earned the right to stay. The smartphone release calendar is maybe 15 years old as a cultural ritual. The instinct to hang on to what's earned your trust is closer to 300,000 years old. The people clutching their crack screen phones aren't behind the times. They're tapped into something considerably older and steadier than any autumn keynote. So here's the real answer to the question this video opened with: what do these people actually see that the rest of us keep missing? First, they see the manufactured itch. That nagging sense that your phone is suddenly inadequate wasn't a discovery you made on your own. It was engineered somewhere in a conference room, and learning to spot a planted need versus a genuine one is one of the sharpest tools a person can develop. Second, they see straight through the status game. A new phone is a broadcast. An old, working phone broadcasts nothing at all, and there is a rare, quiet confidence in needing nothing to prove. Third, they see the full bill, and it's never just the sticker price. There's the mental tax of relearning a new interface, the environmental tab nobody mentions on stage, and the quieter cost of severing an attachment that actually meant something. And fourth, they remember what a tool is actually for. A phone is a tool, and tools are judged by whether they still do the job, not by how they photograph next to this year's release. Somewhere along the way, most people forgot that distinction. The old phone crowd never did. Meanwhile, everyone who upgraded last year is standing in line to upgrade again this year. Paying again. Fumbling through a new layout again. Adjusting all over again. You, on the other hand, still know exactly where every setting lies. Your photos from 6 years back are sitting exactly where you left them. You never handed over $1,000 for a marginally sharper photo of your lunch. You weren't cheap, and you were never behind. You were the one person in the room who looked at something that still worked and asked the one question the entire industry desperately hopes nobody ever asks out loud. Why, exactly, would I replace this? Nobody ever had a good answer. They still don't. That old phone in your pocket isn't proof of what you couldn't afford. It's proof of what you refused to be talked into. And that refusal, calm, consistent, completely without a fight, says more about you than any launch day upgrade ever could. So before you close this out, tell me, what year is your phone from, and what's the real reason it's still in your hand, not the excuse you give people, the actual reason. Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one of them, and I want to hear yours.